Welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Swati Biswas from the Department of Islamic History and Culture, University of Calcutta. Today we are going to discuss from the paper Indian Polity, the module Impact of Muslim Administration on Indian Society. To start with, we will have first see what are we going to do in this paper. Our learning objective is to study the nature of the administrative systems, to see if religion was the basis of this system and how long did the system itself work, how effective was it, and how it affected the common mass. So let's introduce the topic first. The Muslims appeared in the scenario as political leaders in 1192 AD. It started with the Delhi Sultanate and it was founded by the governor of the Ghaznis, Qutbuddin Aibak, in 1192. It continued up to 1526 when the helm of affairs was taken over by the Mughals. More or less, Delhi remained as the capital, or in and around Delhi, the capital shifted here and there, but it was controlled from the area. Thus, India was ruled by the two mighty empires from 1192 and 1526 until and unless the British officially took over in 1857. So we have to remember that these two empires were ruled by the Muslim rulers, where the majority of the subjects were Hindus. The concept of Islamic administration was never wholly introduced into India because the rulers understood that it was an impossibility. Moreover, the rulers themselves did not want to impose the Islamic ideas because then in that case the Islamic ulamas or the religious leaders would have taken over the empire, which they did not want. They were mostly political rulers who had political ambition to rule into India. The Islamic administration, along with the indigenous administration procedures, were conveniently in favor of the rulers, were imposed on the common man. The common man had to abide by the administrative decisions without any choice like any other medieval society. The excessive burden was a phenomenon not only in India but rest of the world too. The inherent social regulation of a Hindu society, that is the commoners were always in distress, and it did not affect the caste-based society at all. The administrative system of the two empires had an evolutionary character, and it continued in some ways even during the British rule. Even the British rulers did not want to change everything in one go. The basic unit of the society was therefore not disrupted. The primary unit of the society remained the village, and the village headmen looked after the village affairs on behalf of the center in some form or the other. The main source of the income of the state was the tax on agriculture. So the purpose of the administrative system was always to appropriate the surplus of the agricultural produce. The administration had to be seen from two areas, the central administration and the administration below till the village to maintain the law and order, and the revenue administration, which aimed at appropriation of the surplus by the upper class or the upper elite ruling class. Now both were complementary to each other. So the central administration was always there to look after the revenue administration so that it works smoothly. The law and order situation had to be maintained for smooth appropriation of the surplus, sometimes in cash or sometimes in kind. Now let's look into the trend of the administration of the Delhi Sultanate and its impact as to how it affected the common man. The administration was always instigated by the economic need of the empire, that is the rulers. The state heavily depended upon its army, which had to be always in operation and had to be paid in lump sum amount. So the expansion of the empire depended on the efficiency of the army, and the efficiency of the army depended, on the other hand, on the tax that was collected. Delhi Sultanate did not change the older system immediately because they did not have the capacity to do it. The situation was then affable for them to introduce regular tax based on Islamic law. Now, when I say Islamic law, I do not always mean the Shariat law, because it was difficult to impose the Shariat law on non-believers, and that the rulers understood as to what are the changes to be done. Now let's look into the first reform, or the first recorded kind of reforms, that is of Alauddin Khalji. The recorded part says the administration of the finance starts with the time of Alauddin Khalji, when a large part of North India was brought under uniform taxation. This is an interesting change which was hard by the rulers to follow. The concept of uniformity of tax was new to the society over this large part of the geographical domain, because traditionally the Indians were in a mood to pay tax regionally to the regional rulers. So after a long time, when the empire was actually formed, an attempt was given by Alauddin Khalji to form an uniform tax system, which was created by the state itself. The decree of the Sultan clearly said that there would be 3 types of taxes. The first would be Kharaz or Kharazi Jizya, which was a tax on cultivation or Ziraat, to be paid by all. Now, when it means all, Alauddin Khalji also meant the heads, that is the Khots and the Muqaddams, to be very precise. The second was the Charai, or the tax on the milch cattle, and third was the Gharai, or taxes on residence. There was provision of measurement or mahasat, but of course we have to understand that measurement in those days would not include each piece of land and everywhere. At least some of the lands were somehow measured. Without any exception, Alauddin wanted a 50% tax on the produce. That is, 50% of the produce, either in cash or in kind, were then taken over by the state. Now, apparently it seems that it was an Islamic law, but in reality, these kind of tax prevailed in India in some form or the other, and somehow the common man was aware of it. So there was not much of a problem when this tax system was imposed. It's only that the harshness of the tax collection became a difficulty for common man, and especially the headmen or the upper class of the agrarian society. Now let's move to the Tughlaqs, how they saw the tax system and what impact did the state have on it. Now, Ghiyasuddin Tughlaq tried to modify the system of the Khaljis by giving some relaxation to the Khots and Muqaddams. Now, this was also done for the intention of the state, because it was understood that the state did not have the capacity to collect the tax on its own. So they had to depend on the Khots and Muqaddams. So Khots and Muqaddams, or the headmen, had to be given some kind of relaxation. They were given back their important position, therefore, but just to keep the balance. But they were not allowed to impose Qismat-e-Khoti. Qismat-e-Khoti is a very interesting kind of a tax which the headmen imposed on the common villages. The new administration had the scope to monitor the subordinate ruling class, therefore. So this is an interesting change that was brought about by the Delhi Sultanate. That is, the society or the villages, headmen or the rulers were controlled by the center if the center had the capacity and the will to do it. Now, this is a possible change that was brought about by these Muslim rulers. This was definitely a long time change. Now, let's move to another very interesting character, Muhammad bin Tughlaq. Now, it is said that Muhammad bin Tughlaq wanted to had a lot of visionary ideas. So did he have in the case of tax system, but all his ideas depended on the money of the taxation. Now, Muhammad bin Tughlaq brought a whole area of Gujarat, Malwa, Deccan, that is again as part of South India, and Bengal under uniform tax system that prevailed in the Doab region. He hiked the tax to a great extent, and the uniformity of the tax system was a blow to the existing norms and the peasantry. Now, added to this, at this same time, the crops failed in many parts and a famine took place. Now, that dislocated agriculture to a large extent, and that shook the economy of the country. The Sultan, as an immediate relief, extended loans called Sondhar, or this is the kind of loan that later came to be called as the Kavi. Now, this is a loan that was given, it's a pre-harvest loan that was given to buy seeds or cultivations and dig wells. Now, Muhammad bin Tughlaq, in the first Indian ruler to have used this device to promote cultivation on a large scale. He remained in Delhi till 1346 to 1347 and conceived grand plans to improve the cultivation. He formed the agricultural department called Diwan-i-Amiri Kohi, where he employed 100 shikdars or officials who were appointed to look after the department and the plans that were laid by the department. It was an innovative idea of the ruler. Well, then he happens to be a Muslim, and it was accepted by his Hindu subjects. Muhammad bin Tughlaq ensured that revenue would only rise if the agricultural land expanded and upgraded crops are sown instead of inferior ones. It also led to the idea that the revenue earned should also be invested to get back a higher revenue in future. Now, this is something that was again new to India, and this could have only been possible because an empire was formed by a visionary and controlled by a visionary. Came to a halt with the rule of Firoz Shah Tughlaq. Now, his weakness weakened the Delhi Sultanate. So did the administration, and the reforms were kept at halt. Firoz Tughlaq not only abandoned the grand project of his predecessors, but moved back to the fiscal concessions where it always depended on the Quds and the Muqaddams. He abolished agrarian cesses like Muhadisat, Kismat and Abwab, and then broke the whole structure of the agricultural system. The administrative skill of this ruler ultimately, therefore, weakened the empire, and then it actually disintegrated. The administrative endeavors of Delhi Sultanate was followed by the regional rulers who came after them and took over North India and also part of South India. Finally, the administration was taken over by the mighty Mughals, who brought about a sea change in the administration. By that time, the society understood that a uniform administration was the best solution for stable law and order. Now, the administration of Delhi Sultanate also brought about a significant change in the control of the currency system and its standardization. Now, because it was an empire, it was able to control and standardize the currency system. In the initial phase, the old coins were in use. The task of minting coins was given to Hindu sonar caste, or as they were efficient to do that traditionally. The system had the capacity to control the individuals before regular mints were established. The helm of affairs then moved to the Mughals in the first quarter of the 16th century. Now, let us look at how the Mughals impacted the society. The administrative system of the Delhi Sultanate continued to stay for long in the Mughal structure. The change that occurred was slow but stable. The administration became more and more efficient. This in turn brought the society within a structure of administration from the top. So it was a core periphery kind of a relation, but the control somehow increased more and more. The core of the society, that is the village, remained undisturbed like the earlier system. The upper echelon was now more established with the help of the administration, of course, and the refusal to obey the order became a punishable offense. Now let's move to the trend of administration of the Mughals. Babur brought the heritage of the Timurid belief of divine right of the ruler to India, and Humayun also followed the suit. In their both brief career, they were unable to lay down any intricate administrative system. The Mughal concept of state was therefore typically a secular polyreligious state based on composite ruling class. Now that was based on equal justice and divine ruler believing in liberal absolutism. The society not even for once was described as Dar-ul Islam, or the abode of Islam, because that never was their identity, neither they wished to form an Darul Islam. The concept of Darul Sulh, on the other hand, or an abode of tolerance, was the established norm. The conquests were not there for aggrandizement, but a greater plan to establish a polity large enough to be an exceptional empire based on tolerance and justice. This was the basis of the administrative changes made by the Muslim rulers and accepted by the majority non-Muslim subjects. The royalty, as per Abul Fazl, was the divine gift and manifested in the form of a light of Faz-e-Izidi. Now this is a Sasanian kind of an ideology which was well used by the Mughals. So according to this philosophy, the royals cannot be challenged or refuted. And allegiance and complete loyalty is the duty of all the subjects and the subordinates. The Akbar added certain Muslim and Hindu ideologies based on hierarchy for his own convenience. This was reflected in the administration from top to bottom, and it suited the caste-based society in all perfection. Now let's move to Akbar's role, his immediate role in the administrative reform. In the Timurid tradition, the wazir was the head of the military and the revenue system. Now this was not only traditional for the Timurids, most of the Asian ruling community believed in this system of wazir or the prime ministership. This was more or less an accepted norm. Now the rule of the Mughals during the first two rulers were no exception. The third Mughal, or Akbar, after a few years of accession, wanted to control everything in a new way and brought about a massive change in the administration of the empire. He understood that segregation of the well-defined department is the key to this part. Now this, compared to his age, was revolutionary and very unique. The post of Vakil, which posed much problem in his early years, was first changed. We have to understand that Akbar ascended the throne at a very young age, and he under the governorship of a post called Vakil. And therefore the Vakil could become very important, and he could even manipulate the emperor and become important. So what he did was he curtailed the power of the Vakil, and then it became a very nominal power, and after that he reshuffled the department and abolished the post of Vakil totally. He first harped on the revenue system, or the revenue department for that matter, because that is the key to the source of income of the empire. The department was headed by Diwan, or the Wazir, and he looked after the income as well as the expenditure of the whole empire. The department was segregated from the military department. This is very important because otherwise one post holder who controlled the revenue and the military department had a possibility to challenge the ruler or become very, very powerful. Now, this was definitely a welcome change. The department then became the tool in the hands of Akbar's excellence. It was led by people like Muzaffar Khan, Raja Todarmal and Khwaja Shah Mansoor, and gave the real shape to the department, who laid down the Hasala system, a system which then changed to the Zabt system, where the revenue administration was put in a rule book and controlled through that rule book. The flexibility was ensured that it could adjust to the regional variations of the empire, so that there is not much upheaval, and provisions were also there so that the tax collection could be maximized. So therefore, this was very, very modern compared to its time, and it incorporated everyone, all the producers in the empire in some way or the other. The administration of the military department also changed. It was headed by someone called Mir Bakshi. This post was segregated from the finance department, and it kept a balance between the two most important departments. The intelligence department was also looked after by Mir Bakshi, and all the spies or the Wakia Navis reported to him, and it got all the informations were then transferred to the emperor himself. The military system was brought under the Mansabdari system. It was a unique creation of the Mughals, where the military posts were assigned to the revenue department, and through that the post holders or the military post holders got paid. It was a complicated system which involved both the military and the revenue system, but of course it did not merge their power together. Now, the term Mir Saman came into vogue during the time of Jahangir and Shah Jahan instead of Mir Bakshi, and during Akbar's period there was another department which came to its being, of course not as a department. Later it was formed a department in the time of Jahangir and Shah Jahan. It was called the Diwani Bayutat, which looked after the karkhanas or the produce of the empire. The factories and the stores under the center were called karkhanas, and it provided work for many, many more craftsmen from the whole of the empire. The legal department was headed by Sadr Sudur. Here it is important to understand that he was head of the ulamas, because he is the one who assigned the ulamas or kept them in their post. But of course he also acted as a chief advisor to the emperor regarding Sharia law. He appointed all the qazis of the empire, but of course these catered to the Islamic law. This department never ever touched the Hindu subjects over any issues, and it was a clear dictum of the emperor that there has to be toleration in this department and the empire at large, and the subjects or the majority subjects who were Hindus or non-Muslims will not be affected by the Sharia law. The last interpreter of the law was definitely the emperor himself, and sometimes he did not abide by the Sharia law. As a matter of fact, most of the times he did not abide by the Sharia law. So the concept of Islamic law was never imposed on the whole judiciary of the empire. The system never wanted to infuriate the subject over any religious matter. This, to their understanding, would jeopardize the law and order, and that in turn will have great impact on the income of the state. Akbar inherited the system of provincial government from the time of Delhi Sultanate and continued it till 1580. Post 1580, the empire was divided into 12 subas or administrative unit under the control of Sipasalar, a term which was later replaced by Subadar. Now, this system divided the land into iktas under the muktis, who had executive power as well as the power to collect the taxes. Now, in the province, Diwan was the second most important position after the Subadar. He was the one who collected the taxes or audited the account and to look after the charitable grants, land grants too. With the help of the amils in the unit later, which is the sarkars, he also had to look into the improvement of the cultivation and control the amils from becoming coercive. The Bakshi in the province acted as the head of the intelligence department, and Sadars looked after the judiciary. Qazis in the province were the assistants to a post called Mir Adil, which was created to keep the notoriety of the Qazis at bay. So therefore, all of these posts were appointed by the center, and therefore one kept check on the others. So together the system worked on a very intricate basis and in a very complicated way, because it was looked after by the center, and none of the posts could become very important in any ways or the other. The Kotwal looked after the civil order of the cities in the provinces. So there was now a segregation between rural administration and the urban administration. He also controlled things like the gambling and the prostitution houses. The weights and measures were looked after them in the market. So there is a check on law and order of the market, again by the Kotwal. The governor thus headed the officials mentioned above, and therefore it was worked like a cohesive team. The provinces was an intermediary between the center and the units below them. The basic change was that the common man with time understood the structure, and that they lived within a mighty empire was soon realized. This brought a change in the society, as people then knew where to move for betterment. This, to some extent, even affected the social mobility of the caste-based society. Artisans and craftsmen from the villages moved to the towns and cities for better prospect. Now let's move into the lower units apart from the provinces. The unit of Sarkar within the province was controlled by a person called Faujdar. He controlled the general administration, but of course he was not a military person. The Qazi was responsible for the general justice of the Muslims when a party in dispute was a Muslim. The Pargana below the Sarkars was controlled by a Shigdar, who looked after the administration, and the revenue there was collected by the Amil. Of course, we have to understand the Amil controlled the headmen in the villages. The Kanungos determined the boundaries of the Parganas and the villages within and kept the local revenue records. This functioning of the system, though complex in nature, set the foundation of the empire. The whole system of administration reached up to the village. The village's age-old tradition was not touched. Keeping the village within its norm, provision was made to extract the maximum from them in the form of revenue with the help of the administration. During Akbar's time, direct complaint could be made to the emperor himself. Of course, later Shah Jahan changed it, and where the clerks would collect the complaint and the emperor was reported. And the concept of giving the ruler with his divine presence would give a Jharokhai darshan, or the morning session. The rulers regularly attended the Diwani arm or the public darbar, and official work was attended by the Diwani caste. So therefore, there was a balance of the center up to the village where the control was in the hand of the ruler. But of course, there were provisions through which the common man could access the ruler himself. The administration was well knit and it continued till the time of Bahadur Shah I. The system made the ruler accessible to his subjects and aimed at organized justice and good governance. The administration of the two empires back to back ruled by the Muslim rulers set the ground for the administrative system which was taken over by the British Empire. The administration was well knit enough to have encompassed the whole society. So let us summarize as to what we have discussed in this module. The system became organized but complicated. It was an evolutionary in nature, effective and efficient when the center was strong. The society adjusted to the changes accordingly. All classes of people had access to the administration and it was never essentially based on any religion and thus accepted by the majority of the masses. Thank you for your patient listening, and you can refer to the e-text of this module if you want.